The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched out like a massive bowl carved from black stone. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that reached up toward the distant ceiling. Each species had their own section, marked by different lights and atmosphere controls. The air hummed with translation devices working in hundreds of languages. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood alone at the human podium in the center of the chamber. She wore a simple blue uniform with the Earth symbol on her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her face showed no emotion as she watched the final vote count appear on the massive screen above. The numbers glowed bright against the dark stone. Vote for containment, 1,246. Vote against containment, 1. The single vote against came from the human delegation. A wave of relief swept through the chamber. Many species had waited decades for this moment. The Zephyrians, tall blue beings with 4 arms, nodded their approval. The crystal-bodied ethereals pulsed with satisfied light. Even the peaceful Aquarians, who rarely voted for anything harsh, had supported the containment order. Chancellor Vestara of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the main podium. Her voice boomed through the translation system. The vote is complete. By overwhelming majority, the species known as humanity will be contained within their home system of soul. They may not leave this boundary without assembly permission. They may not establish new colonies. They may not interfere in galactic affairs. She paused and looked directly at Sarah Chun. This decision comes after careful study of human behavior over the past 50 years since first contact. The Assembly finds that humans pose a risk to galactic stability due to their aggressive expansion, unpredictable actions, and dangerous rate of technological development. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. The mechanoids, beings of metal and circuits, processed the data and found it logical. The gardeners, plant-like creatures who had lived in peace for thousands of years, feared human violence. The ancient Voidwalkers, oldest species in the galaxy, remembered other young races that had caused chaos. Sarah Chun had listened to 3 days of testimony. Speaker after speaker had told the Assembly why humans were dangerous. They expanded too fast, colonizing 47 star systems in just 50 years. They learned new technology too quickly, taking ideas that had taken other species centuries to develop and improving them in decades. They fought wars with tactics no one had seen before. They created art and music that moved even ancient species to tears, which somehow made them more frightening, not less. The final evidence had been the Proxima incident. When the hive swarm attacked the peaceful Gardener homeworld, the Assembly had debated for weeks about the proper response. Military experts said the hive was too strong, too adaptable. The swarm had defeated every force sent against it for 10,000 years. While the Assembly talked, millions of gardeners died. Then a single human fleet arrived at the battle zone. The humans studied the hive for 6 hours. Just 6 hours. Then they began their attack. What happened next shocked the galaxy. The humans had somehow turned the hive's own adaptation ability against them. They used the swarm's greatest strength as a weapon to destroy them completely. The victory had saved the gardeners, but it terrified everyone else. How could a young species solve in 6 hours what had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for millennia? What else might humans do if they were left unchecked? Chancellor Vestara continued her speech. The containment order will remain in effect until humanity proves they can be trusted with galactic responsibility. We do not do this from hate, but from necessity. The galaxy must be protected. Sarah Chun stepped forward to respond. The chamber fell silent. Every being waited to hear how humanity would react to their cage. "Thank you, Chancellor," Sarah said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I have listened to your concerns about my species. I have heard your fears about what we might do if left free. I understand your decision." Many beings relaxed. The human was being reasonable. Perhaps containment would work without conflict. Sarah continued. However, I must inform the Assembly that humanity respectfully withdraws our membership from this organization. The chamber erupted. Voices rose in a dozen languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up with the sudden chaos. Chancellor Vestara slammed her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Silence. She finally shouted. Withdraw? You cannot withdraw. The containment order prevents you from leaving your system. Sarah smiled for the first time during the trial. It was not a warm smile. Chancellor, you seem to misunderstand our situation. We joined this assembly 50 years ago by choice. We agreed to follow galactic law and respect assembly decisions. We did this voluntarily, as free beings. She gestured to the screens, showing the vote count. Today, you voted to take away our freedom. You decided we are too dangerous to be treated as equals. Very well. But if we are no longer treated as members of this community, we are no longer bound by its rules. War Leader Korth of the Vorthan Collective stood up from his seat. The massive armored being pointed one clawed finger at Sarah. You speak of freedom, but you are contained. We have fleets around your system. You cannot leave. Sarah turned to face him. War Leader Korth, your fleets can certainly stop our ships from leaving Sol System. But can they stop us from choosing our own path? Can they force us to remain members of an organization that just voted to cage us like dangerous animals? The ethereal prime speaker, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal shell, floated down from the upper levels. Young human, you do not understand the dangers of the galaxy. There are threats out there that would destroy your entire species. We offer protection through containment. Protection? Sarah laughed. Honored Prime Speaker, we have just learned that the galaxy will vote to imprison us the moment we show any sign of strength or independence. We have learned that our supposed allies will discuss our fate for days while millions die, then condemn us for acting to save lives. What exactly are you protecting us from that is worse than this? She walked toward the exit of the chamber. The other 11 human delegates rose from their seats and joined her. They moved with quiet precision, gathering their materials and preparing to leave. We came to this assembly as friends, Sarah said as she reached the chamber door. We offered our help, our ideas, our friendship. Today we learned that friendship with the galaxy comes with chains attached. We declined this offer. The massive doors of the assembly chamber began to open. Sarah Chun looked back one final time at the thousands of beings who had just voted to contain her species. The human delegation is leaving now, she announced. We will not be back. Security forces from a dozen species moved to block the exits. They carried energy weapons and wore battle armor. But as the 12 humans approached, something made the guards step aside. Perhaps it was the calm certainty in human eyes. Perhaps it was the quiet way they walked, like people who had nothing left to lose and nothing left to prove. The humans passed through the security cordon without breaking stride. Behind them, the Galactic Assembly sat in stunned silence, slowly realizing they might have made a terrible mistake. The corridors of the assembly station buzzed with activity as news of the human withdrawal spread. Delegates hurried between meeting rooms, speaking in urgent whispers. Emergency communication arrays lit up as messages flashed to homeworlds across the galaxy. The humans had done something no species had ever done before. They had simply walked away. Sarah Chan led her delegation through the wide hallways toward the docking bay. Her team moved like a machine, each person carrying exactly what they needed, nothing more. Behind them, dozens of species representatives tried to follow, shouting questions and demands. Ambassador Chun, wait. Called Dr. Zephy's, the Aquarian peace negotiator. His blue-green skin rippled with distress patterns. You cannot simply leave. There must be discussion, compromise. This is how galactic society works. Sarah stopped walking. The corridor filled with beings as word spread that the human leader might speak again. Cameras floated overhead, broadcasting to 1 billion worlds. "Dr. Zephyrs," Sarah said, "you voted to cage my species 30 minutes ago. What compromise were you planning to offer? A larger cage?" The Aquarian's tentacles curled in embarrassment. The containment order was meant to be temporary. A cooling-off period while we found a better solution. Temporary? Sarah's voice carried across the silent corridor. The order had no end date. No conditions for review. You plan to keep us locked up until we stop being who we are. Commander Dex of the Mechanoid Collective rolled forward on his mechanical treads. Your emotional response proves the assembly's point. Humans are unpredictable. You threaten galactic stability. Sarah turned to face the robot being. "Commander, your people calculate everything perfectly. Tell me, what was the exact probability that we would accept permanent imprisonment?" The mechanoid's optical sensors flickered as he processed the question. Probability of acceptance was calculated at 73.6%. Most species accept assembly authority. And the probability that we would fight your containment, 16.2%. Most young species lack the military strength to resist. What about the probability that we would simply leave? Commander Dex's sensors dimmed. This option was not calculated. No species is ever withdrawn from the assembly. Sarah smiled coldly. That is the problem with your calculations, Commander. You assume all species think like you do. Humans do not. She continued walking toward the docking bay. The crowd followed, growing larger as more delegates joined them. Security forces tried to establish some kind of order, but they had no protocols for this situation. No species had ever simply quit the galactic community at the transport level. War Leader Korth was waiting with a full squad of Vorthan warriors. The massive armored beings blocked the path to the human ships. Korth's red eyes glowed behind his battle mask. "The assembly has not given permission for humans to leave," he growled. "Return to your quarters until this matter is resolved." Sarah walked straight toward him without slowing down. "War Leader, we are no longer assembly members. We do not need permission to travel freely. You are still contained within Sol System. These restrictions remain in effect, are they?" Sarah stopped 3 feet from the towering warrior. "Your containment order applied to assembly members. We have withdrawn our membership. Your authority over us ended the moment we walked out of that chamber." Korth's hand moved to his weapon. "Galactic law still applies." "Which law?" Sarah asked. "The law that says free species can choose their own government? The law that says civilized beings cannot be imprisoned without trial? The law that says military action requires assembly approval, which you no longer have for actions against non-members." The war leader hesitated. Behind his mask, Sarah could see him running through military regulations, looking for some rule that would let him stop her. She pressed her advantage. "War Leader Korth, you are a soldier. You follow orders from legitimate authority. The assembly had authority over us when we were members. Now we are not members. What authority commands you to stop us now?" Other species began whispering among themselves. The human was right about galactic law. The containment order legally applied only to assembly members. If humans were no longer members, the order might not be valid. The ethereal prime speaker floated over the crowd. "This is impossible. The assembly represents all civilized species in the galaxy. There is nowhere else to go." Sarah looked up at the energy being. "Prime Speaker, your people are among the oldest in the galaxy. You have seen many young species rise and fall. Tell me, what happened to those who chose to remain isolated from galactic society?" "Most failed," the Prime Speaker admitted. "They could not survive alone. And those who succeeded? The ancient being was quiet for a long moment. A few became strong in their isolation. When they returned to the galaxy, they were different, more powerful than before. Sarah nodded. Perhaps isolation is exactly what humanity needs. She walked past Korth toward the docking bay. The Vorthan warrior raised his weapon, then slowly lowered it. His military code had no provisions for stopping beings who were technically free to leave. The docking bay was massive, designed to hold ships from hundreds of species. The human vessels sat in their assigned berths, sleek, white ships that looked somehow different from other galactic designs. They were smaller than most diplomatic craft, but they radiated an aura of barely controlled power as the human delegation approached their ships. Delegations from a dozen species tried one last time to stop them. "Think of the trade agreements," shouted the Ferengi commerce leader. "Human technology drives half the galactic economy. Consider the cultural exchange," pleaded the Batazoid arts minister. "Human creativity has enriched every world it has touched. Remember the medical advances," called the Vulcan science advisor. "Human research has saved billions of lives." Sarah stopped at the ramp of her ship and turned to face the crowd. "You are right about all of those things. Human trade, creativity, and science have benefited the galaxy greatly over the past 50 years. Hope flickered in many eyes. Perhaps the humans could still be convinced to stay. "But you forgot something important," Sarah continued. "We offered all of those gifts freely, as equals and friends. Today you decided we are too dangerous to be your equals. You voted to take away our freedom to explore, to grow, to choose our own path." She gestured to the crowd around her. "Every one of you could have voted against containment. Every one of you could have stood up and said that caging a peaceful species was wrong. How many of you did that?" Silence filled the docking bay. Not a single non-human delegate had voted against the containment order. "That is your answer," Sarah said. "When we needed friends, you became our judges. When we needed trust, you chose fear. When we needed support, you voted for chains." She turned and walked up the ramp. The other human delegates followed her without looking back. Behind them, the assembled representatives of galactic civilization watched in growing horror as they realized what they had just lost. The human ships powered up with a sound like controlled thunder. One by one, they lifted from the docking bay and headed for the void between stars. As they disappeared into hyperspace, emergency sessions began across the galaxy. In the assembly chamber, Chancellor Vex Thara called for order as panic spread through the ranks. For the first time in galactic history, a species had chosen exile over submission. And somehow, watching them go, many beings suspected that humanity had just won a victory none of them understood. 3 days before the vote, Chancellor Vex Thara had stood in her private office looking at files that made her hands shake. 50 years of human activity lay spread across her desk in data charts and incident reports. Each document told the same story. Humanity was growing too fast, learning too quickly, and changing too much. The first reports had seemed almost funny. When humans made first contact in 2387, they were barely capable of faster-than-light travel. Their ships were crude metal boxes held together with primitive fusion drives. Galactic experts estimated it would take them centuries to reach even basic spacefaring civilization. They were wrong by about 400 years. Within 5 years, human ships incorporated gravity manipulation technology. Within 10 years, they had improved shield designs that have remained unchanged for millennia. Within 20 years, human engineers were teaching advanced physics to species that had been building starships since before Earth existed. Dr. Kethrel, the Altarian scientist who first studied human learning patterns, had written in his report, "They do not learn technology the way other species do. They understand principles, not just procedures. They see connections where others see separate systems. This makes them dangerous. Chancellor Vestara remembered the Zephyrian exploration incident. For 3,000 years, her people had slowly and carefully expanded through space, setting up colonies only after decades of study and preparation. The standard galactic approach required extensive environmental analysis, cultural impact studies, and resource allocation planning. A single colony took an average of 40 years to establish properly. Humans colonized 47 star systems in 50 years. They did not follow the careful protocols. They did not wait for approval from established species. They found empty systems and simply moved in, adapting to conditions that would have taken other species generations to study. When the Altarian Council formally complained about human expansion speed, the human ambassador had seemed genuinely confused. Why would we wait 40 years to build homes? Ambassador Martinez had asked. We know how to make the air breathable and the soil fertile. We know how to protect ourselves from radiation and hostile life. What else is there to study? The Altarians had tried to explain the importance of proper procedure, of respecting established methods, of moving slowly to avoid mistakes. Martinez had listened politely, then asked, how many potential colony sites have you studied that you never actually colonized? The answer had been 1,847 sites over the past millennium. Perfectly good worlds that remained empty because the studies were never quite complete. The conditions never quite perfect enough. We could have those colonies ready for settlement in 18 months. Martinez had offered helpfully. The Altarian delegation had filed an emergency, complained about human arrogance that same day, but it was the cultural incidents that really worried the galaxy's leaders. Art and music were supposed to be stable, reflecting the deep traditions of ancient species. Each race had their own forms, developed over thousands of years, perfect and unchanging. Then humans started creating. The first human concert on Bellerophon had caused 3 diplomatic incidents. Aquarian listeners had wept openly during a performance of something called jazz, claiming the music spoke directly to their souls in ways their own ancient songs never had. The Crystalline Collective, beings of pure mathematical thought, had stood in silent amazement as human musicians improvised complex harmonies that followed no known musical theory, yet somehow sounded perfect. Worse, other species started copying human artistic styles. Young Zephyrins abandoned traditional sculpture to create abstract works influenced by human imagination. Mechanoid poets began writing in free verse instead of their classical algorithmic patterns. The ancient cultural barriers that had kept species separate for millennia began to crack under the influence of human creativity. The Science Council had been the most frightened of all. They had filed report after report about humanity's dangerous approach to research. Where other species spent decades proving each step of a theory, humans made leaps of intuition that somehow worked. They combined technologies from different species in ways that should have been impossible but created amazing results. The medical breakthrough that cured the Catarian. Plague had taken human doctors 18 months to develop. Galactic medical experts had been working on the same problem for 80 years. When asked how they solved it so quickly, the human medical team had explained their process. We looked at how the disease attacked cells, then asked what would happen if we tricked it into attacking something else instead. So we created fake cells that looked tasty to the virus, but were actually poison. The disease ate the poison and died. The Galactic Medical Council had spent months analyzing the solution, trying to understand how humans had made such an intuitive leap. Their conclusion was deeply disturbing. Humans did not think like other species. They saw patterns and possibilities that escaped even the galaxy's greatest minds. But the final straw had been the Proxima incident 6 months ago. The hive swarm had returned after centuries of dormancy, attacking the peaceful Gardner homeworld without warning. The swarm was a legend among galactic civilizations, an ancient enemy that adapted to any attack, learned from every defeat, and grew stronger with each battle. For 10,000 years, the standard response to a hive outbreak was evacuation and containment. Military experts agreed that direct confrontation was impossible. The swarm simply absorbed whatever was used against it and became immune. The assembly had called emergency sessions to debate the proper response. Military advisors recommended evacuating the Gardner colonies and establishing a quarantine zone. The diplomatic specialists suggested attempting communication with the hive intelligence. Scientific teams wanted time to study the swarm's adaptation mechanisms. While they debated, 12 million Gardners died. Then the human fleet arrived. Battle Commander Sarah Chun, the same woman who would later face the assembly as an ambassador, had taken one look at the tactical situation and made a decision that stunned every military expert in the galaxy. Instead of attacking the hive directly, she began feeding it information. The humans sent wave after wave of probe ships at the swarm, each using different weapons and tactics. The hive absorbed each attack and adapted, just as it always did. But the humans were learning something with each failed assault. After 6 hours of study, Chen activated her real plan. The humans had been mapping the swarm's adaptation process, learning how it incorporated new defenses. Then they created a weapon that looked like one thing, but was actually something else entirely. The hive saw energy beams that resembled standard plasma weaponry. It adapted its defenses accordingly. But the beams were not plasma. They were adapted nanites programmed to look like energy while actually being matter. When the swarm tried to defend against energy weapons, the nanites slipped through its defenses and began rewriting the hive's own adaptation code. Within hours, the swarm was adapting itself to death. Its own defensive systems turned against it. The ancient enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was gone, destroyed by a species that had known about it. For exactly 6 hours, the victory celebration lasted less than a day before the fear set in. If humans could solve the hive problem so quickly, what else might they be capable of? If they could turn a species' greatest strength into a weakness in a matter of hours, what would they do to the rest of the galaxy, given enough time? Chancellor Vesthara closed the files and walked to her window, looking out at the peaceful lights of the assembly station. Tomorrow she would call for the vote that would cage humanity forever. It was necessary, she told herself. The galaxy needed protection from this young, unpredictable species. She tried not to think about the other possibility, that the galaxy was about to make an enemy of the most dangerously creative species it had ever encountered. She tried not to wonder what humans would do when they discovered their friends had voted to become their jailers. Most of all, she tried not to remember the last line of Battle Commander Chen's report on the hive incident. The universe is full of problems waiting for the right solution. Today, we found one. Tomorrow we will find others. The vote was scheduled for tomorrow morning. By tomorrow evening, humanity would be safely contained within their home system, their dangerous potential locked away from the rest of the galaxy. Chancellor Vesthara went to sleep telling herself this was the right choice. She woke up 3 hours later in a cold sweat, wondering what she had just done. 6 months after the assembly vote, Dr. Zephyr sat in his empty laboratory on the Aquarian homeworld, staring at equipment that no longer worked. The water purification system had failed 3 days ago. The environmental controls were running on backup power. The medical bay had shut down completely when its biofilters stopped functioning. All of the broken systems had one thing in common. They contained human-designed components. Dr. Zephyr had not realized how much. Aquarian technology depended on human innovation until it was gone. Over 50 years, Human engineers had quietly improved almost every system on every Aquarian station and ship. They had fixed problems so elegantly that other species forgot the problems had ever existed. Now the problems were coming back. The communication. A ray crackled to life with an incoming message from the Aquarian Science Council. Dr. Zephyrs activated the holographic display and found himself looking at Council Leader Neff, whose usually calm blue-green skin showed patterns of deep distress. Zephyrs, what is the status of your research into human-designed systems? The same as everywhere else, Dr. Zephyrs replied sadly. We can maintain their technology, but we cannot improve it or adapt it to new problems. Every day, we lose more functionality. Council Leader Neff's skin patterns shifted to even deeper shades of worry. The medical facilities on Aquarius Prime just lost their neural surgery capabilities. The human-designed precision instruments have developed a fault we cannot repair. Without them, we cannot treat severe brain injuries. Dr. Zephyrs closed his eyes. How many people will die? Too many. And this is just the beginning. The economic analysis came in this morning. 40% of our industrial base relied on human improvements to Aquarian technology. We are facing systemic collapse across multiple sectors. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency broadcast from the Galactic Assembly. Chancellor Vexthara appeared on screens across the galaxy. Her forearms spread in a gesture of desperate appeal. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, 6 months ago, this assembly made the difficult decision to contain the human species within their home system. This decision was made to protect galactic stability and ensure the safety of all civilized worlds. She paused, and Dr. Zephyrs could see the strain in her face. However, recent events have shown that the situation is more complex than we initially understood. The sudden absence of human participation in galactic affairs has created challenges that we did not anticipate. Dr. Zephyrs almost laughed. Challenges was a polite way of describing the crisis spreading across the galaxy. Trade routes optimized by human logistics were breaking down. Scientific research projects led by human intuition had ground to a halt. Cultural movements inspired by human creativity were withering away. Therefore, the Chancellor continued, the Assembly has voted to send a diplomatic mission to the Sol system to discuss the terms under which humanity might resume limited participation in galactic affairs. We believe a compromise can be reached that addresses the concerns of all parties. The broadcast ended, and Dr. Zephyrs turned back to Council Leader Neff. They are going to ask humans to come back. The motion passed this morning, Neff confirmed. 847 votes in favor, 399 against. Fear is a powerful motivator. What did the diplomatic mission find when they reached Sol system? Neff's skin patterns turned pale with shock. That is the problem, Zephyrs. The Sol system is empty. Dr. Zephyrs felt his heart skip a beat. Empty? What do you mean empty? The human colonies are gone. All of them. Mars, the asteroid belt, the orbital stations around Jupiter evacuated completely. The only things left are automated defense platforms that politely request all visitors to leave. Where did 50 billion humans go? No one knows. There are no distress signals, no evidence of violence or disaster. They simply left, all of them. Everything that could move has vanished. Everything that could not move was abandoned in perfect working order. Dr. Zephyrs tried to process this information. 50 billion people do not just disappear. They must have gone somewhere. The investigation fleets have searched every system humans ever visited, Neff said. Their former colonies are empty but undamaged. It looks like they packed up everything valuable and left, but we cannot find any trace of where they went. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy now. The Mechanoid Collective had sent their most advanced sensor arrays to scan for human ships, human settlements, any sign of human activity. They found nothing. The Zephyrians had dispatched military fleets to search the outer rim territories. Empty space. The Ethereals had used their ancient mystical senses to probe the cosmic web for human life forces. Silence, humanity, had vanished from the galaxy as completely as if they had never existed at. The economic impact grew worse each day. Human-designed medical equipment failed in hospitals across 1,000 worlds. Human-optimized agricultural systems produced smaller harvests. Human-inspired art lost its emotional power, becoming mere imitation without the creative spark that had made it special. But the psychological impact was worse than the economic damage. Species that had voted for human containment now faced the reality of a universe without human presence. The galaxy felt smaller, emptier, less full of possibility. Dr. Zephyrs had not realized how much hope humanity brought to galactic civilization until it was gone. Other species thought in terms of conservation and stability. Humans thought in terms of growth and change. They asked, what if, where others asked, why bother? They saw problems as puzzles to solve rather than facts to accept. Without them, the galaxy felt strangely static. The worst part was not knowing what humans were doing in the void between stars. Intelligence analysts worked day and night to answer that question. Where could 50 billion people hide? What were they building? What were they planning? The Vorthan military commanders were the most worried. War leader Korth had submitted a classified report to his high command warning that humans might be developing new weapons in secret. They solved the hive problem in 6 hours, his report stated. What could they accomplish in 6 months of uninterrupted research? The Crystalline Collective's mathematical models painted an even more disturbing picture. Their calculations suggested that human technological development would accelerate rapidly once freed from the need to explain their innovations to other species. Without the burden of teaching others, their report concluded, human capabilities could advance exponentially. The Ethereals, oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, had stopped making predictions entirely. Prime Speaker Luminara had issued a single statement. We have made a calculation error of cosmic proportions. The consequences are beyond our ability to foresee. 6 months of silence from humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson they should have learned before the vote. You do not realize how much light a star provides until it goes out. Dr. Zephyrs returned to his broken laboratory and tried once more to repair the water purification system. As he worked, he thought about human engineers he had known over the years. They would have fixed this problem in minutes, probably while explaining 3 ways to improve the original design. Now there was only silence where their voices had been, and empty space where their ships had flown. The galaxy had voted to contain humanity, believing they were protecting civilization from a dangerous young species. Instead, they had driven away the one source of genuine innovation and hope the galaxy had known in thousands of years. As Dr. Zephyrs struggled with technology he could maintain but never truly understand. He wondered if humanity would ever forgive them for their fear. More troubling, he wondered if the galaxy would survive long enough to ask for forgiveness. Outside his window, the stars seemed dimmer than before, as if something essential had gone out of the universe forever. 2 years after humanity vanished, the galaxy held its breath as impossible signals reached every communication array simultaneously. The message came from the galactic rim, from empty space where no civilization had ever existed. It began with music, the opening notes of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, growing stronger with each passing second. Dr. Zephyrs was working late in his rebuilt laboratory when the transmission began. The familiar melody filled his ears, and for a moment he thought his damaged communication system was playing old recordings. Then he realized what he was hearing. New human voices singing the ancient Earth song, but these voices carried harmonies no human choir had ever attempted. The music was somehow bigger, richer, touched by influences from across the galaxy. As the symphony reached its crescendo, the music faded and Ambassador Sarah Chun's voice replaced it. She sounded older but stronger, speaking with the confidence of someone who had seen wonders beyond imagination. Greetings to our former colleagues in the Galactic Assembly. This is Sarah Chun, speaking for the human Commonwealth and our allied species. We hope this message finds you well. Across the galaxy, emergency sessions convened as the transmission continued. On Aquarius Prime, on Zephyria, on 1,000 worlds. Leaders dropped everything to listen to the first human words heard in 2 years. You may be wondering where we have been and what we have been doing since leaving your assembly. Today, we are prepared to show you. The music stopped. In its place came a new sound, a deep harmonic tone that seemed to vibrate through space itself. Every sensor array in the galaxy detected the same phenomenon. Massive structures were decloaking along the galactic rim. Not ships, but cities. Hundreds of them, each larger than most planets. Dr. Zephy's watched his screens in amazement as the images came through. The structures were beautiful beyond description. Vast spheres of crystal and metal that seemed to pulse with inner light. Gardens floated in open space, connected by bridges that stretched across the void. Cities hung in the darkness like jewels, powered by captured starlight and the energy of the cosmos itself. We have spent the past 2 years learning to live between the stars. Sarah's voice continued. We have built homes in the void, farms in the vacuum, cities that sail through space itself. We have transcended the need for planets entirely. The implications hit the watching galaxy like a physical blow. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had evolved beyond the need for the resources that every other species fought over. They had turned empty space into a garden, made the void itself into their homeland. But we did not do this alone, Sarah continued, and her next words sent shockwaves through every government in the galaxy. We were joined by friends from many species who chose to leave their homeworlds and join our journey into the unknown. The camera views shifted to show the interior of one floating city. Dr. Zephy's gasped as he recognized faces from dozens of species, walking together through corridors of impossible beauty. Aquarian artists worked alongside human engineers. Zephyrian philosophers debated with crystalline mathematicians. Young beings from every race in the galaxy had apparently chosen exile over the safety of their homeworlds. Over the past 2 years, Sarah explained, approximately 2 billion individuals from 847 different species have joined our communities. They came seeking what their homeworlds could no longer provide, the freedom to grow, to explore, to become something more than they were. Dr. Zephy's realized with growing horror that these were not random individuals. The images showed the galaxy's brightest scientists, most creative artists, most innovative thinkers. Humanity had not just taken their own. People, when they left, they had taken the best minds from every species willing to follow them. Chancellor Vex Thara appeared on the emergency broadcast from the assembly chambers, her face pale with shock. This is impossible. How did they build all of this in just 2 years? Sarah seemed to hear the unspoken question. You may wonder how we accomplished so much so quickly. The answer is simple. We stopped waiting for permission. We stopped explaining ourselves to those who feared our potential. We stopped moving slowly to comfort those who preferred stagnation. The transmission showed vast manufacturing platforms that built new cities in a matter of weeks. Terraforming ships that could create garden worlds from raw asteroids. Energy collection systems that harvested power from cosmic radiation and stellar winds. We learned to think on a galactic scale, Sarah continued. While you debated the safety of colonizing single planets, we colonized space itself. While you worried about the risks of new technology, we invented tools that make the impossible routine. Dr. Zeffis watched as human children played in zero-gravity gardens with companions from a dozen species. They were learning to see the universe not as a collection of separate worlds, but as a single vast frontier waiting to be explored. "We have built something unprecedented in galactic history," Sarah said. "A truly multi-species civilization united not by fear or necessity, but by shared wonder at the infinite possibilities before us. We have proven that the universe is big enough for every dream, every hope, every wild idea that frightened minds once called impossible." The transmission paused, and when Sarah spoke again, her words carried the weight of a final judgment. "Today, we make an announcement that will affect every being in this galaxy. The human commonwealth is leaving the Milky Way entirely. Our destination is the Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million light-years from here. Our journey will take 1 million years at the speeds we can achieve with our current technology." Silence fell across the watching galaxy. The scope of what humanity was proposing was beyond anything any species had ever attempted. To leave their home galaxy entirely, to journey across the void between galaxies, to spend 1 million years traveling toward an unknown destination. It was either the greatest act of courage in cosmic history, or the ultimate expression of madness. "Our first colony ships will depart in 1 standard year," Sarah continued. "We extend an invitation to any being, any species, any civilization that values exploration over safety, growth over stagnation, and possibility over predictability. You are welcome to join us in the journey to a new galaxy." The offer hung in the void like a challenge. Dr. Zeffis felt something stir in his heart, an emotion he had not experienced since his youth. It was the desire to see what lay beyond the horizon, to discover what wonders waited in the dark between galaxies. "To those who choose to remain in the familiar boundaries of the Milky Way," Sarah concluded, "we wish you well. You have taught us valuable lessons about the importance of courage in the face of the unknown. You showed us that we were thinking too small when we dreamed of joining your community. You helped us realize we were capable of creating our own." The images shifted one final time to show the vast human fleet preparing for departure. City ships the size of moons, escorted by exploration vessels that gleamed like stars. Manufacturing platforms that could build new worlds from cosmic dust. Research stations that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "We go now to the greatest adventure in the history of consciousness itself," Sarah said. "We go to find what lies waiting in the dark between galaxies. We go to discover what becomes possible when fear no longer limits imagination." The transmission ended with coordinates, the location where beings could apply to join the Great Exodus. Then came the final image. Earth itself, transformed into a vast ship. Its continents rearranged into gardens and cities. Its oceans captured in crystalline spheres. The entire planet becoming humanity's flagship for the journey to Andromeda. Dr. Zeffis sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Humanity had not just survived their exile or even transcended it. They had turned it into the greatest adventure in cosmic history. They were leaving the galaxy entirely, taking with them everyone brave enough to face the unknown. Within hours, the assembly was in emergency session. The vote was unanimous for the first time in galactic history. A formal apology and a desperate plea for humanity to reconsider, to stay, to forgive the galaxy for its fear. But the human cities were already accelerating, their exotic drives bending space itself around them. By the time the assembly's message reached the galactic rim, humanity was gone. Dr. Zeffis made his decision that night. He submitted his application to join the Exodus, along with 300 other Aquarians who had worked closely with humans over the years. They were tired of a galaxy that chose fear over wonder, safety over growth. As the months passed, the true scope of the human invitation became clear. 30% of the galaxy's population had applied to leave. Scientists, artists, philosophers, engineers, the dreamers and builders from every species were choosing the unknown over the familiar. The Galactic Assembly watched in growing horror as their brightest minds packed their belongings and headed for the galactic rim. They were losing not just population, but their capacity for growth, their hope for something better than endless repetition of the past. The last transmission from the human exodus came 1 year after their first announcement. Dr. Zephyrs was aboard a human city ship by then, watching Andromeda grow larger in the viewing screens. The message was broadcast to the Milky Way as the fleet reached the point of no return.